Welcome to Feminist Frequency Radio. This is the show that asks you to be critical of the media you love. I'm Angela Bennett.
And I'm Ruth Marks. And this season, our feminist media criticism has found its way to the World Wide Web of online conspiracies. Because this is the season of Cyberpunk.
Mr. Deckard, Dr. Eldon Terrell.
The new millennium, this is amazing, will bring a new experience.
How do you fit all that in your head anyway?
I had to dump a chunk of long-term memory.
This is gonna be fun, Terry.
Who is this?
Take this thing out of the case and stick it up your nose.
Mozart's Ghost, the hottest band on the internet.
This week, we are discussing the 1995 thriller The Net, directed by Irwin Winkler and starring Sandra Bullock as a systems analyst whose life is threatened by cyber terrorists called the what are they called?
Praetorians?
Praetorians, led by Jeremy Northam. Bullock ends up on the run for her life and safety and protection of, I guess, like the entire world.
Sure.
Yeah. And on the search for the floppy disk that will allow her to reclaim her identity and protect the hackers from further disrupting governmental systems. With a supporting cast including Ray McKinnon and Dennis Miller, The Net is a movie directed by the Oscar-winning producer of Rocky that blends the mid-90s fascination with how much of our lives were just beginning to be tied to the internet, with a clumsy analogy to the HIV epidemic thrown in for good measure. Because, you know, of course, why not? Really quick, before we get into everything, I do want to add a content warning for suicide because there are some discussions of that in the movie, and I assume will be in our conversation as well.
Computer analyst Angela Bennett was just doing her job when she stumbled onto something.
What is this?
She never should have seen.
I plugged it in and I'm staring at the personal medical files of the Undersecretary of Defense, Michael Bergstrom.
Someone's tapped into the system.
How long would it take to track her?
Depends on how long she stays online.
Something
Why would anybody want to do any of this?
that reaches farther than she could ever imagine.
They hacked into computers and they caused this chaos. Wall Street.
The market panicked as officials suspended trading.
The Department of Water and Power in Atlanta. LAX.
We've lost radar contact.
Joining us to discuss this movie is someone whose own podcast title directly contradicts the premise of this movie. The host of There Are No Girls on the Internet, chronicling the experiences of marginalized people online and how they shape the internet. She's also the founder and CEO of the mission-driven creative studio Unbossed Creative and has hosted the Stuff Mom Never Told You podcast. She's also taught writing and social change at Howard University. Welcome to the show, Bridget Todd.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here to talk about The Net with you two. This is like a dream come true.
This feels like it. I mean, this is it.
Yeah, this is the end of podcasting. This episode. It's just like we're gonna just do it all. I'm so excited to meet you. Thank you so much for joining us today and for picking. This was when when I pitched the Cyberpunk Summer season to Kat, I was like The Net. Like it was the only and Strange Days.
Oh, another classic.
Those are the two that I'm like, I am so excited to revisit these movies. So, question to start us off: who has already seen The Net prior to the rewatching of The Net?
Oh, definitely me. I saw it when it first came out. So it's funny. I've rewatched it several times since then, and my Wi-Fi network password network signal is a reference to the film because I love it just that much.
Oh my God, what a great Kat. Good job. Good job with this guest. So excited. Have you seen this before, Kat?
This is one of those movies that I feel like I have so much cultural osmosis of this movie, but I don't know if I've actually seen it. Like, I remember bus shelter ads. I remember commercials for The Net. I rewatched the trailer and I felt like I could recite it word for word, but I don't know if I've actually seen it. And it was a lot like, even watching it and I was like, oh, she's on another boat. Like there's a lot of stuff I didn't expect to happen in this particular movie. But everything that happened in this movie delighted the hell out of me.
This is so interesting because like I grew up in Canada mostly until I was a teenager. And we got like American media because American media colonizes the whole world. But I don't have this experience at all. It wasn't until like, I don't know, 10 or 15 years ago that someone was like, have you seen The Net? And I'm like, what are you talking about? I had no idea what this movie was. And then I watched it, like gritting my teeth being like, this is going to be like hackers. Like, let me just like see if it's okay. How, whatever. And I historically am not a fan of like young Sandra Bullock roles. And I remember watching it and being like, whoa, this movie is so good. So having that memory and coming into it again today, especially through like watching all these other cyberpunk movies, I'm like, interesting, like it's an interesting second take. The thing I remember the most about this movie, and we will absolutely get into this, is I remember she ordered a pizza on her computer and being like, holy shit, like that was so above and beyond its time. And being like, that's so cool. And as it was kind of the only thing I remembered about this movie. And as I rewatched it yesterday, I was like, oh, this is like 2 seconds of the movie. And to me, it was like a 30-minute montage. And then my friend I watched it with, he only remembered like a computer on a beach. Like that's the only memory he had of it. So we both went into it kind of new, but I had this like warmth towards it,
And like, this is a movie that I feel like we could go, and we will, like, we're going to talk about all the silly stuff watching this in 2022. But like, there's also some kind of intense stuff that especially the two of you, I'm very interested to hear. Like, Bridget, you've seen this movie a number of times. I'd love it if you could talk to us a little bit about like, well, the genesis of your podcast and also like how we talk about women on the internet. It was definitely part of this movie that she's the only female, or like she has come out as being a woman hacker in this forum, and the way that she's targeted, I was like, this is surprisingly prescient. Like, this movie thinks it's going to be about, can you imagine you can go to pizza.net to order a pizza? Wow, barcodes. But it ends up being about like a woman on the internet is victimized.
Yes.
Like that is also not what I remembered or expected to be focusing on.
Yeah, I remember watching this when I was just a young kid, and I was fascinated with computers and technology, but I wouldn't have thought of myself as like a woman on the internet just yet. And the thing that I feel like the movie, there's kind of this like overlay of women have no place on the internet, and if they are on the internet, they're about to get victimized, they're about to be targeted, or that it's just not healthy. I feel like that's the sort of subtext of Angela Bennett's life, is that she's not healthy. She's a loner. She doesn't have a lot of relationships in the meat space other than Dennis Miller, who like, despite the fact that he's like obnoxious, part of me is like, oh, he doesn't seem so bad. Like, I don't know.
Such good casting for that character, though.
Like, they
right?
could not have picked a better actor to portray that her like therapist slash maybe love interest.
Sleazeball. Like, I like, as soon as he came on screen, I was like, oh God, this is so good.
When I kept thinking, who's the Dennis that's in Demolition Man? That's like the underground Dennis. He was in Rescue Me, redhead.
Oh, the comedian. What is his name? Oh my God, Dennis Leary.
Dennis Leary. I kept being like, oh yeah, like this is another Dennis Leary, Sandra Bullock, 90s. And then I was like, oh no. This is this guy. I totally forgot. But okay, you're like on the internet, but you're not thinking my identity on the internet.
Exactly. And yeah, I think the way that they portray the internet as something that is a force in Angela's life that keeps her from like living a real life. I think really it sort of made the film on its face a bit of a kind of cautionary tale, I would say. Like, I remember watching it with my parents. My parents were like, that dang internet. Like, they really saw it as like what can happen when young women get caught up in the scary world of the net. And so I think that a lot of folks, when this was first coming out in the 90s, really saw it as like a cautionary, like, watch out kind of tale. And I mean, I know we'll get there, but by the end of the movie, she's like having more experiences in the real world. And you're meant to be like, oh, she went through a journey where she realized that the internet isn't as safe as you think it will be.
Right.
Yeah, it's definitely like the hot chick hacker, right? Like, that they felt like they were being subversive, and like, this is also a part of the the period in the 90s where women were allowed to sort of be action heroes in some way or do things that were traditionally male hero roles in a much more mainstream way than we had in like, you know, the 70s. You would have like the sort of ladies superheroes like the Bionic Woman and Wonder Woman, but they, you know, just kind of spun around in circles. But in the 90s, we got like, was Charlie's Angels in the 90s? I feel like there's this whole thread of like, you can be really hot and kick ass at the same time. So you have to be sexualized, right? And so I think there's something interesting here where you're like, I don't really buy that this like hot movie star who looks perfect on the beach in a bikini is also this like big loner. Like she doesn't really quite sell it. And I feel like it's not even a problem for me because there's so many problems with this movie, but it does feel very much of its time in terms of how it was cast, who this character is, like the types of roles women could get that were breaking out of the mold around this time. Even though we can look back and be like, wow, this is tropey as fuck.
Well, even the fact that Jeremy Northam is like his own honey trap and he's like king hacker, and like that guy looks like, he looks like he'd have a yacht and he'd be having like
his name
babe parties.
Is Jack Devlin. Could he be the bad guy? Maybe, I don't know. Yeah, he's like no one in the like, not that you have like in the dream world, especially early days, like all kinds of people were online. It wasn't just like, you know, like what we would refer to as the archetype of the basement dwelling nerd or what have you, which is part of the gatekeeping that has kept women and non-binary folks out of gaming and tech spaces, really, even though you don't know who was behind the avatar on your screen growing up. This is very much Hollywood casting, you know, like we give them something good to look at kind of energy.
You know who's behind the avatar if they print it out and tape it to their mailbox like Cyberpunk did.
I'm dying. I was like, you know what? As I like both pointed it out, I was like, I am here for the practical effects and the nods to the storytelling, like the director being like, okay, well, we got to tell them, you know, because they might have forgotten who this is and what we're doing, because this movie is so bad. Like, look, I love it. I'm going to come out and like, even after I finished watching it, I was like, okay, this is not as good as I remember, but I still think it's like pretty fucking fantastic. It's had to have gone through hella notes because like things don't make sense. Like there's no through threads. Like you can't, in my notes, I wrote, this is a don't ask questions movie, because every time I ask a question, it's like, you can't answer that. Like, why is he trying to kill her? Why didn't she tell him that the disc was destroyed when he tried to kill her the first time? And then at the end of the movie, she says, the only person I told the disc was destroyed to was Jack. And you're like, but you didn't, because I remember making a comment like 3 times about why she didn't just say that the disc was fucking destroyed. And then when we get into the whole like Illuminati hacker anonymous energy, I have more questions that I think are very important to bring up, but it really is like somebody came through and kind of destroyed probably what was a more cohesive script. Is the energy I get from this movie.
Yeah, it gives big notes energy, and it's definitely one of those movies that don't overthink it. A lot of the tech, to your point, like a lot of the technology terms that are being thrown around in the film, I'm like, is that even a thing? Or like, are they just assuming that the audience doesn't know too much about what they're suggesting is happening right now?
Okay, so I think tech representation is a huge part of this podcast series, right? We just watched Tron, so the next episode that comes out is going to be about Tron. So like the tech language in a movie from the 80s is so funny. In this one, I was actually like, first of all, she's on a Mac, which I think is really cool, because early day Macs weren't like popular. And also I loved all the on-screen stuff. Like I thought that the way they represented like the web pages and like with all of the ways that you need to make it interesting still felt a little more, I'm going to say very hesitantly, a little more authentic, but also like I liked the way they did that visual representation. Like the Mozart's
Mozart's Ghost.
Yeah, so like this whole story starts because you can click a pie symbol and then all of a sudden you've gotten like all of the information that you need, like the secret information or whatever. But that Mozart's Ghost, like the internet's greatest rock band or whatever, like, dude, there were sites like that, like not that much, right? This is clearly made for TV, like made for movies, so it looks more interesting. But like, we had weird shit like that, and it felt very nostalgic to me.
It's better than some of the interfaces that they put today in like TV when they're supposed to be Googling, but they can't say Google, and it's like, Mr. Search. And I'm like, what? Why is this so bad looking? Or like phone screens that they've fixed in post all look terrible. And I was like, this looks like they really built this site and they just filmed it. Like,
My favorite example of that is the music video for that Kelly Rowland and Nelly song, where she's trying to text him, but it's Microsoft Excel. It is like, for some reason, superimpose an image of Microsoft Excel into her her Motorola two-way.
You pointed out, like, this film is definitely trying to say something. It's trying to say something about the future we were on the precipice of in 1995, where everything was being scanned, and that, at a hospital, your record isn't just on a clipboard, it's susceptible to hacking. And like, this is true. And this, I remember when Homeland did like somebody hacked a pacemaker, and I thought like, oh, okay, like I haven't seen that in a movie before. I don't know what to say about what the movie was trying to say about AIDS, but it definitely was trying to say something about AIDS. Like, the apple that the guy eats is like a Turing reference. And then that, as we know, is like the Apple, the reason why Macintosh like uses the Apple logo as well. But I just felt like it was such a clumsy version of like, what if computer and human have virus, like not really knowing where to go with it, but just like, ew, we're in a world where there's like a big scary virus, and that's also what's going to happen next with this internet world, www.pizza.net.
Yeah, I thought about this all day, and I think so. I agree with you that it's like very clumsy. Whatever they're trying to say about AIDS and computers is very clumsy, but I think they are trying to say something about the way that, sexually transmitted diseases in the 90s and sort of our anxiety around them really came from in-person human connection, right? And so, humans being together physically. And Angela is somebody who, because of the internet, she doesn't really have a lot of that in her life. She doesn't have a lot of arenas in her life where she can be physically present with people. And so I think they're trying to sort of highlight these two different anxieties. One, the anxiety around, sexually transmitted diseases as an outcome of interpersonal IRL commingling. And then all the things that happen when you go the other direction and avoid that. And so you're like, oh, I'm only meeting people on the internet, but there's still viruses, I think it's some sort of,
oh my God. I was like, look, okay, listeners, viewers, however you're engaging with this material, none of that is like in the movie, but like, yes, like that. I'm like, thank you for that analysis, because great.
I mean, to be clear, I had to go back and read the Wikipedia plot summary just to make sure I understood what the hell was happening in this movie, just plot wise, because it's so clunky.
Yeah, I think that there's something interesting around like halfway through the movie, you get these monologues from Angela about like Techno-fear, right? She becomes the audience character she is kind of the audience character the whole time, where she goes on these monologues about how like everything's online and it can all be corrupted, and like we put everything online, and how dangerous is that, and blah blah blah. Tale as old as internet. But it felt really dissonant that she was the one giving those monologues, because look, so before social media, I think social media has really kind of warped our sense of like connection and what that means. And like, it can be very unsatisfying, but also whatever. When I was a teenager and I decided that I didn't like any of my friends anymore, I spent a year basically only having friends online. And that was really, and like I built goofy websites and fan pages, and like we would literally mail things to each other. And like that was how I was feeling connected to people, because I wasn't enjoying my high school life. And I feel like for Angela, you know, her life isn't bad. And like she has these connections in this relationship. And like, I wanted a little bit more value in like, it's not just like she's such a loner and that's how they could devastate her life, but also like these relationships aren't nothing, right? They're not all fake, and they're not all fishing, and they're not all trying to like get one up over her. So like, I don't need the movie to say that explicitly, but I didn't need her to be the voice of the Techno-fear either, right?
Yeah. I mean, Cyber Bob was willing to meet with her IRL and was murdered trying to help her, like risked his life to help her. Like these, she logs on to her, I guess it's like a chat room, and everybody's like, oh, you're one of us. Like she has meaningful connections. And I mean, I remember watching the movie when I was young and thinking her life seemed really cool. She turns on a fireplace on her computer. Like it seemed really cool. And it does seem like the movie kind of doesn't do a great job of showing that those connections were genuine and meaningful. You're meant to be like, oh, what an empty life.
Yeah, like there's it also kind of is setting up its own drama. So the fact that none of her neighbors know her, it's even a little gross that the deal with her mom is that she has Alzheimer's, so she doesn't remember her, but she's the only person who might. And it's like, it just seems patently untrue. Like she has coworkers, she's a remote worker, but like that other guy was killed too because he was going to fly his own private plane to like come give her the information. But I think because there aren't like enough characters in this story, like maybe that's why they just were like, she has to be the one to say it. But yeah, it doesn't work. It doesn't work that way.
And the whole her being a loner is why they can do this to her and creates the tension and the main source of conflict. So they kind of have to do that, I guess, if you're going to stick to the story. Which kind of brings us to the Praetorians.
I should have Googled that.
Who are just, they're anonymous, right? Like I mean, so they are and they aren't. And I'm going to use anonymous as a shorthand here for us to understand like internet, like not 4chan. I mean, I know it came out of 4chan, but like, like we're going to damn the man energy, right? Yeah. And we're going to like, take websites down and we're going to get you through these networks. Right. So they have that kind of energy. Again, using that as a shorthand. I'm not commenting on anonymous. But what I got so confused about, and it took so long for the movie to come around, is that the guy who died by suicide, you don't know what's going on with that. And you don't know how that's connected to anything. And then you find out that there's this other guy who runs a gateway, who runs this corporation. And it's the security systems that all of like the FBI and like all of these companies and institutions Airports are starting to use. Yeah. Like everything. And finally it clicked in my brain, like a little too late because this movie sucks, is that like, oh, he runs he contracted or runs this hacker group to create this, to create problems in order to fund Gateway, right? To create the fear. So while Angela is talking about Techno-fear as like just an individual, they're not really doing a good job of talking about the institutional, like the manufacturing of fear so that they can sell product. Now, okay, so there's that, right? Which you literally don't figure out until the fucking end of the movie. And you're like, what on earth? The thing that really threw me and why I was making the anonymous connection or using that as the shorthand is because there is a moment that is the weirdest fucking moment where Jack Devlin, God bless his cheekbones, says that the politician who died was homophobic. And so you find out slowly, piece by piece, that these hackers put like faked his medical records and said that he has AIDS. And so that's why it was like payment. It was like comeuppance, right? Like, how dare you be homophobic? So then you have tying in all the like AIDS protests and comments in the background, the 2 times that it's mentioned. So I'm like, wait, are they for good? Like, why would they do that? Like, are they like, and I say for good, like, right. You know what I mean? Like that one line shifted the entire perception of this hacker group that I think is just really a corporate shill. Right? Sorry, that was very long. I just like am still processing this.
Totally. And so this is one of the failures. I love the movie, but this is one of the failures of the movie that I don't feel like they do a good job of really clearly explaining anything, because as I said, I watched it last night. I talked about it with my partner this morning. I checked the Wikipedia just to make sure that I had all the details. They say that the undersecretary, the guy who dies by suicide, the reason why they target him is because he was against the idea of, gatekeeper getting the contract for all the different like governmental agencies. I was like, how would I know that? And so the reason why they did this whole thing of making people believe that he had AIDS and having him die by suicide was because they were trying to rub him out, because he was the person who was the holdout for them getting the like all of the government agencies, I guess like contract to sell them their digital security software or what have you. This totally, I don't know if they just like didn't explain it or if this person on Wikipedia was incorrect, but if that is really what they were going for, totally went over my head, didn't see it, didn't get it, didn't absorb that. But according to Wikipedia, that is why, because otherwise it wouldn't, like, you're like, how are these things related? Like, he was homophobic, so they had to take him out.
And it's like, it's a disjointed storytelling, but not stylistically enough to where you're like, this is going to factor in. Like when I remember being totally surprised. I was like, we're 15 minutes into the movie. She's going on vacation to Mexico. Like, where is the story going to be pushed forward? But there's like news footage in the background. And there's like all of these things that are happening, but they don't do I guess, Irwin Winkler like was involved in like Goodfellas and like all of these big, was a 9-time Best Picture nominee as a producer, the director of this movie. So it was like trying to be this kind of almost like a political thriller, but it just doesn't know enough, I think, how to talk about the internet or like how to portray it, which nobody in Hollywood did at the time. But there's so much about the fact that this is a woman that is our main character. I mean, not just the like she's hot and it's cool to see like this lady's so hot, but she can't even get a date because her standards are too high, ? Like that whole line about Captain America meets Albert Schweitzer, who I wrote it all down. Butch, beautiful, brilliant, which I was like, isn't that what everybody wants? Butch, beautiful, and brilliant, like
the freebies.
But there is a lot of
also, sorry, I was like, okay, they're clearly going for the alliteration, and that's why they used Butch. But like, that's such a weird term to use outside of queer spaces to just describe like cis dudes. I was just like, okay, like. I know what you're getting at, but you literally, this was just because you wanted to have some flower to your language.
Yeah, I was like, Butch, beautiful, brilliant, like Linda Hamilton, of course. Like, yeah, I get it. Yeah. But there's like also so much about I don't know, like the internet has infected my vocabulary enough to where I don't know if I'm using terminology correctly anymore. But the like gaslighting side of everything that she says is called into question. And if this were a male hacker character, like there would be something about like, he's just a crazy guy. But because it's a woman and she's isolated, I do feel like there is so much that like taps into my personal fear and vulnerability watching this. Like, well, if I'm in the hospital and I tell you something and you don't believe me, that is highly dangerous. And that is let's talk about Dennis Miller for a second, because the line that upset me the most in this movie. So Dennis Miller is her ex-boyfriend and ex-therapist. I got the sense.
Yes.
Which is very unethical. But he's okay. He's helping her out.
Which is, sorry, hold on. Which is why I was like, this is great casting because she's such a desperate loner that the little bit of attention that she got from her therapist, she was like, I guess I love you now. And then he's so smarmy that you're like, oh, he would have taken advantage of that for sure. So like that was, great.
So he's helping her out. He thinks she's probably doesn't quite have the story right, but he's helping her out because he cares about her. And that's where we're at until he starts to realize that everything she's saying, there's starting to be evidence. And he says, you know, what's frightening me is I'm starting to think you're not delusional. And that just fucked me up. It's like to be like, you're afraid that the thing I'm saying is true is actually true. You were happier with it when you thought I was off my rocker. Oof. That was really like, that just said a lot to me about like paranoia and this kind of thing that, you know, we've seen this in thrillers since like the 60s and earlier, but to have it in this internet space and like, if you tell somebody something happened to you on the internet, why should they believe you?
Which some of us have experienced a lot of in these contemporary times. Cool. I thought you were going to say, so that was very smart and so much more interesting than what I'm going to say, is I thought you were going to say that the thing that freaked you out the most was that he offered to put her mother into a state sanitarium. And she was like, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Yeah. And then they do it again. And I kind of screamed at the TV being like, in what planet does that sound like a good idea? Like what? Sorry.
I mean, that was also a question I had. I mean, I don't know how it works. He was like, oh yeah, I'll put her in a state sanitarium. I'll say I want her there for observation. I don't believe that he is her mother's doctor. Any doctor anywhere can be like, oh yeah, this patient, I need to move to a state facility for observation. No, I'm not her doctor. Why do you ask?
Which, the only reason that line was in there was so that Jack Devlin could be like, well, I got to get to her before she moves, instead of just like going after her, because that isn't enough. Like they're just like building all this like weird conflict that you're like, okay, good, and then fine.
Dennis Miller's killed, right? Or does he survive?
He's killed.
Yeah, he's killed. Yeah,
he gets the pills, and then he's hospitalized, and then he goes in and kills him. But there's that whole thing with the IV and shit. And then she's like, even when he's in the hospital, she's like, well, maybe we can lay together in the future. And you're like, what the fuck is happening here? Why would you think that? Okay, so one thing that I was disappointed at, and I actually am thinking now about what you were saying, Bridget, about how like she makes more connections with people forced through this turmoil that she's going through, which by the way, we haven't said, like, I think if this is like a not good version of The Fugitive, right? Like it's got that energy that I think I find very appealing of like, at every point, me as a female viewer of this, I'm like, oh my God, this is horrifying. Oh my God, what would I do? How would you get out of this? Like what would happen? You know, like, I think there was something, I think that piece of it was effective for me, but I wanted more like of her using her intelligence to hack her way into her solutions. Like at some point she steals a BMW, which whatever, maybe she had a BMW and she parked it in the BMW parking lot and that so that she could look like she was hiding, but wasn't. But like she stole that fucking car, right? And like to steal that car, it was probably a car that was like technologically savvy at some point. And I would have liked to see how she did that. You know, like she doesn't really use her skills very much.
Just at the very end, really, like once she's on the run from her trip to Mexico, I feel like it's not really until she tries to infiltrate her imposter's desk at her computer, which why would she have a desk at the office if the real Angela Bennett was always a remote worker? But like it's not until that moment where she's like, all right, I'm gonna like hack my way out of this, like
which was great when they both were on. I loved that ending in the like that was great part of this movie. But when both Angelas are at like their computers, I was like, oh my God, they're gonna have a hack off. Oh my God, I'm so excited. And then they don't, and I was like, God damn it, that's disappointing. But I still do appreciate that she like there was the callback to the escape button virus, and you're like, hell yeah, you planted a virus on this motherfucker.
Yeah, I loved that scene where they're all in their cubicles, and so they're doing that kind of like groundhog thing where they're sort of peering up across the divider. There is one thing that, like, when I watched this yesterday, I was like, why are they saying this? When she goes into the office, they're doing an announcement where it's like, attention, all staffers. Just so you know, the booth for our convention is on the left side of the convention center. And I was like, why would they be making an all staff announcement over the loudspeaker? But then it's because, the audience is going to say when she goes to the convention, how does she know where the booth is? It's because conveniently they made that all staff loudspeaker announcement about where the booth was.
Yes. And it's funny. I've been to conferences at Moscone. So I've been like a dozen. I've been to many conferences at Moscone Center, and I was like, what up, Moscone Center? And I love that you're just like, oh, conveniently, there's just like a computer conference happening across the street from their office in downtown San Francisco. And then you're like, and then you remember that they made that announcement. And because I remember also being like, why would you make that announcement? Just send an email.
Yeah.
Like even at that time, like you would just send an email about that, or like a memo to whatever on the fridge of the kitchen.
There was two more things I wanted to bring up. I feel like this is a game I made up in my mind. Did anyone else play Not Prawn? Which was, I definitely made it up. It's like a Berenstain Bears thing.
But it was like Angela right now, like, no, that doesn't exist. What are you talking about? That's never existed.
No, I am the real Angela Bennett.
Your name is Ruth Marks.
Yeah. It was like this game in the early 2000s where it was the first time I remember as like a layperson. I'd been on the internet, but where in order to advance to the next level of the game, you would have to like go into the developer tools and change something, and then it would take you to the next page. And I felt like it was a really kind of good entry point for learning about like HTML and like how these things work, and beyond just like changing your mouse on MySpace to like have a trail of little toasters or whatever. But the clicking the pie symbol in the corner was like very reminiscent to me of those kind of early like, oh yeah, this is just a website, but here's the like secret thing for cool people who can find but the fact that in this movie she had to narrate everything because that's how movies like this work made it feel so stupid. Where she was like, he wants to meet IRL in real life. Oh, this symbol looks familiar. It's like, just click it. Like, I'll get it. I'll get that you're clicking and you'll go into the next place.
When the movie ends over the credits, there's a little pie and then the click and then the credits run or whatever. And I was like, oh man, if they make this movie today, like I want an interactive piece where we can actually like click on it and like do a whole thing. I do want to mention that she's playing Wolfenstein 3D, which I don't know if that ever came out on a Mac. But the guy on the phone that she's talking to with her colleague is like, I wrote it down somewhere, but it was like the most bloody game that's ever been made or whatever. And it was just really funny because this is also when 3D first person shooters came out, right? And like Doom and Wolfenstein 3D, and like it was such a big deal. So like that kind of reference also super dates this movie into when it came out and some of the like the fears of the growth of technology, right?
And there was one big missed opportunity in this chase scene at the end where the imposter Angela Bennett gets shot. Like you see a woman kind of run past and get shot and fall down. And then you go and realize, oh, it's the fake Angela Bennett. She's dead. I was like, holy shit, this movie is about to be my favorite movie of all time. I thought Sandra Bullock was going to pull like a floppy disk out of her bra with like a bullet stuck in it. And I was like, oh my God, I was like just imagining this is going to be so good. And then I like, obviously that didn't happen.
What a disappointment.
Wouldn't work, but would have been really
all right.
cool.
Here are my random mishmash. One, she has anchovies on her pizza, so she's clearly the best person ever because anchovies on pizza are amazing. And I was like, yes, woman, thank you. Okay, two, why does she have her name written on her fridge? Does she forget her name? Is really bizarre.
In like magnetic poetry. Like it looked like those little magnetic poetry things spelling it out.
But like the size of the freezer, like it was like huge. Like it was like, it's not just like Angela, like it was written out with like 20 poetry words for one letter. It was wild. The next question. So, okay, this is actually a question, not just an observation. Remember when they're in Mexico and she's cold, and instead of giving her his jacket, he pulls out like a napkin or like a handkerchief and he ties it around her waist. And like, cool look. Like, I was into it. I was like, this kind of works. It's kind of fun. But what piece of garment is that? Because it's not a scarf and it's not a napkin. Like, what the fuck is that?
And even weirder, when she gets out of the hospital and she's wearing her same clothes, you realize she's just got that shirt tied up. So she could have untied the blouse and had it covering her abdomen.
Okay, I was wondering about that because I had that same thought and I was like, oh, this must be a different shirt. Because I also was like, she could have just untied her shirt. Like, I don't understand what's happening here. But she does have new clothes because the skanky fucking therapist brings his wife's clothes to her, remember?
Amy. That's right.
And they fit her perfectly. So that's not creepy at all.
No, that was definitely the moment where, like, if you're on a date or whatever and they tied a handkerchief around your midriff, like, run, do not go to a second location.
No. Go to a boat in the dark in the middle of nowhere. And I love that. Oh my God. I love this movie so much. Okay. We're just evolving into like the little things. I love this movie so much. So he puts on the boat, he puts the gun in his jacket and then she like hugs him and gropes him and doesn't feel this gun. Like, what the fuck? Truly, I love this movie. It's not good, but it has so much heart. And like, there's just something about it that's like not quite enough to be like, wow, this is garbage trash and I never want to see this again. I can't believe I wasted my time.
No, it's deeply watchable. Like, I would put this
watchable.
On. Yeah.
It's so, I mean, I will watch this movie again. That will happen, but it's not good. Like, it's so flawed, but wonderful.
Yeah, it's not good. I think that you're onto something about sort of it being of an era. I feel like, the movie Speed had just come out a year before, which is another
still good.
Still good.
Still good.
Still holds up.
Still good.
Still holds up. I think we just wanted kind of action-packed thrillers with hot women as the lead, but movies that you don't really want to ask too many questions about because if you do, it falls apart. I think that was what we were about in the 90s. Watchable thrillers that, you don't really need to think too hard about.
And Kat, I think you're right in that, like, oh boy, whatever you're right about just left my brain. I think you are right about how I'm going to keep talking until it comes to me.
Gaslighting.
Fuck. No, something about like the cyberpunk genre. Oh, that like, so these movies are kind of a time, right? Like something I was thinking about that we don't need to get into, but is like, what is cyberpunk today? Like, we don't have that. It doesn't look the same. And I have some thoughts about that I'll save for the Tron episode, but like, they don't like, we don't quite like the internet is not quite our entire worlds at this point. Right. And so there is very much a sense of like, these films are trying to tap into like the anxieties and the fears and the transition that is happening societally. And they don't quite know how to show it because sitting on a computer is not interesting cinema, right? Like staring at so they're always a little bit absurdist and silly and goofy. And I think with our vantage point today, we can appreciate how goofy that looks. But like you all said at the beginning, like they still don't know how to show computers today. Yeah. Like they still don't know how to like show screens because it's not interesting cinema. Right. And that's why shows like I love Halt and Catch Fire. But that is, and it's a show about technology. But it's a show about people. The technology doesn't super matter. Right. And that's the thing is about these movies. It's about the technology, but they can't really quite do that in a way that's cinematic.
I completely agree. I watched a movie recently. I'm not gonna remember the name, but it's about a reporter who was trying to sort of catfish a terrorist, and she's like trying to get a profile. It might be called Profile, and the entire movie takes place on a computer screen. So she's video chatting with him, DMing him, doing text messages with him, and it's so boring. Like the premise is very interesting and exciting, but I'm sure that there are films that do it well, but so often, even today, I feel like when films are trying to represent something happening online, it can be done in this way that just feels kind of artless and a little bit boring.
Yeah. That there's a whole episode of a YouTube channel that doesn't run anymore called Every Frame a Painting. And I hope I'm not confusing things, but I think they did a whole episode about text messaging and how text messaging just looks bad. It just like, no matter how anyone does it, it just doesn't look good. And I don't feel that strongly about it, but it is one of those things that like, I think every filmmaker is trying to like figure out how to do this in a way that feels okay. My last thought that I just remembered is when, there's these lines about like computers are your whole life. Like, what do you do on the computer? And you're like, what do you need? That kind of energy. And I remember being young and people, if you knew how to do anything, you just were good at computers.
Yeah.
And that's also this energy of like, if you know anything, like you are good at computers, and it doesn't matter if you're like a designer or a web coder or a programmer, like all of it's the same shit at this period of time too,
Yeah, when I was younger, like I guess like late high school, I was I probably thought of myself as Angela Bennett because I knew how to do stuff on MySpace. I knew how to add music to MySpace and make it so it was impossible to pause. So like, oh, you're definitely hearing this Panic at the Disco song, and no, you can't pause it. Like, so all my friends thought of me as like I knew how to burn CDs back when that was a thing. Like, yeah, I knew very basic things on the computer and like fancied myself somebody who was good at computers or like was doing something clandestine when really I was just doing obnoxious things. But you're so right that this movie is of an era that if you knew about computers, it was easy to think of yourself as a, I'm almost embarrassed. I owned a pair of fingerless gloves because that's what I thought like back in the day, we thought hackers had a whole like style. They had a wardrobe, a look. And I was trying to like mimic my, like base my look on that look.
Yeah. Who didn't?
And just to say, like, this movie came out a couple of months after While You Were Sleeping, which was another big Sandra Bullock hit. And like, that is the most analog movie I can think of. Like, nothing about the deception that movie is based on is solved by an Alta Vista search or anything. Like, it is just completely in a pre-internet world. And then a couple of months later, we have like the net, and we're trying to figure out what this world is. And that's why it's so fun to look back at where we were at in 1995. But for now, we will be back to share some freakouts.
The Games and Online Harassment Hotline is a text message-based, anonymous, and confidential emotional support hotline. And it's created specifically for the gaming community. Because we're gamers and creators, and we want to help each other. So, how does it work? Well, you text us and we listen. Our hotline is 100% anonymous. We can talk about anything you need to, and only what you want to. The Games and Online Harassment Hotline is an inclusive resource for anyone, no matter how you identify. If you feel that you need emotional support, you can start right now by texting support to 23368, and our qualified responders will be there to listen to you, free of charge. Reach out, get help, and let's make this community a better place to work and play.
What's your freak out? Now it's time to talk about what's been thrilling us, moving us, upsetting us, or infuriating us recently. Kat, what are your feelings?
Oh, too many to list. But I will say I watched the new Father of the Bride, which is, I don't know, like the 5th remake or something of this story. And as a movie to have on HBO Max in the background, it's just lovely. But I was really, really digging. The movie ends with a cover of Daft Punk's Get Lucky that is performed by a mariachi band and a conga band. And I thought that was such a really great way of blending the film's Mexican and Cuban families who are having this wedding. So many movies paint all of Hispanic culture. And I say that like I grew up identifying as Hispanic, and then now I'm just like, I don't know what word to use, but just like painting everything with the same brush. And so to have a movie that actually has like an interest in telling the story of two families who are culturally distinct in a way that this movie being made 5 years ago wouldn't have done that. So it was just really nice to even see like the differences in costume between a mariachi band and a conga band, and to show that happening in like a really joyful, fun scene. Then I was Googling it because I just wanted to see like, oh, like Daft Punk like doesn't license their music for a lot of movies, and this is like one of the only times they've ever done it. While I was looking it up, I found the best quote from Gloria Estefan, who plays the mom of the bride in this movie.
What? Okay,
I love Gloria.
Okay, wait.
Estefan.
I'm sold. I now need everything you just said. We need to. Okay, please
Gloria
continue.
Estefan she's the star of this movie. I mean, Andy Garcia is amazing. He's the father of the bride, but like Gloria brings this like just you want more of her. Every time she's on screen, you're like more of this. So in an article that I read about this song, like in particular, this article was about like this final wedding dance scene that was filmed and how joyous it was during COVID to be doing this big party scene, Gloria Estefan's like, listen, at a Cuban wedding, my song, Conga, would have been playing. So it's not quite accurate that song doesn't play at the wedding in the movie, but we didn't want people to be taken out of my character, which is why we don't play my song Conga in this scene in this movie. And I was like,
wow,
God bless. Like Gloria Estefan is 100% right. Like it's rude that every wedding in a movie doesn't play Conga, which is like the wedding song you want to hear. But that she was like, out of respect for the integrity of my character in this movie, we didn't want to like confuse the audience. So there's something like, it makes me, I was watching it and I wasn't like super into it, but then I kept thinking about the soundtrack, and there's like a lot of reggaeton in the soundtrack, and just how thoughtfully like music supervised this movie was kind of made me want to watch it again, because I was like, that's where you show a lot of like the heart and the culture of the characters. In between the like my bridesmaid dresses, like kind of, you know, whatever scenes that are happening. But yeah, Father of the Bride, the new one on HBO Max.
I feel like they should have just played the fucking song. We know who she is. It doesn't matter.
Well, and it's like right at the beginning of the credits, like they could have done like at the end of Bend It Like Beckham, where everyone just kind of sings to camera. Like they could have just been like, and now here's all the actors and crew singing and dancing to Gloria Estefan, and she's just there like being paid homage. Like I would love that, but
yeah, all right.
Yeah.
Special guest Bridget Todd. What are you freaking out about?
Something that I am freaking out about is folks might know recently a new Beyoncé song dropped called You Won't Break My Soul. And I'm a huge Beyoncé fan, so I obviously was excited. But the thing that I'm really freaking out about is, so the song is kind of pays homage to sort of house music and electronic, like music that has roots in electronic music. And so many people were talking about how, you know, what a big departure this is for Beyonce, and how, you know, they were comparing it to when she had a country sort of song on Lemonade. But so many people were on the internet rushing in to correctly identify that house music, electronic music, all of that has such deep roots in Black culture, Black queer culture. And so I'm really here for this collective moment of education around the ways that Black queer people brought us house music, brought us electronic music, and really have been at the forefront of that music, even though it's not necessarily a genre that a lot of folks necessarily think of as a Black style of music. It definitely is. And so I'm just really here for this like, I don't know, public education and public reclaiming of something that's ours that we don't always get credit for. I'm a big house music girl, so love those conversations happening.
Man, I used to go to house parties in LA when I was younger all the time, like the house clubs. Oh, so good. This is funny. So I don't have any space in my brain to really pay attention to a lot anymore. Like I'm just so burnt out at everything that like my news intake is very limited. And at some point I was looking at Twitter and just everyone's talking about house music. I'm like, what the fuck is going on? I didn't know until this moment that it was because of this Beyonce song. I was just like, I don't have time or energy for this right now. So that's amusing. And I should go listen to this song.
You should definitely listen to it. And the lyric video is the only thing we've seen so far, right? But like when Big Frida is like commanding you,
yes.
And it's like strobes, like it starts with like a photosensitivity warning for people with epilepsy. The strobes on this lyric video while Big Frida is commanding you to move.
Quit your job.
Quit. Stop. Go. Whatever you say. Anita, what are you freaking out about?
I am freaking out about a FX TV show called The Bear. I binged this whole thing in one day. Like I could not stop watching it. So it is it's labeled as a comedy and it's not. First of all, it is full drama. Also, we already did a suicide warning on this episode, so I am just going to add that here that there's suicide in it. It is not a comedy, it's a drama, but it's 30 minutes. So I think that there's like a weird algorithm thing that like dramas have to be more than 30 minutes and comedies can only be 30 minutes, whatever. It's about a rising star, like fine dining chef that comes back to Chicago to take over his family's restaurant after his brother's death. It stars Jeremy Allen White, who I didn't know, but apparently he's known for being on Shameless, which I never watched. He was sensational, really incredible. Now, I love this show. I think it's not like the best. It's not like I'm coming out of this being like, holy fuck, this was the best show ever. Like my mind is blown, but I can't stop thinking about it. Like it's so well done. The premise is really interesting. I also like when I see kitchen, like our listeners know that I care a lot about food, but when I see like kitchen stuff, I'm like, man, in another life, I would have worked in a kitchen. Like there's some, like, I know that they're terrible and like chefs are assholes but like, there's something about the loudness and the camaraderie and the just like stay in your lane and do your fucking thing great, which I think is also what draws me to film, like production. It's the same kind of energy of like everybody's just doing the thing that they do really well in synchronicity, right? And like there's like a speed and a magnitude and an energy to it, which I don't, separating from my burnout, like fantasy life kind of energy, right? So that I found very appealing, right? Lots of shots of food, lots of like kitchen stuff. One thing I do want to point out, and I've mentioned this several times on the podcast recently, because like, I think that the new sort of like quote unquote diversity model is that you have central white characters and then you have people of color in the cast. So it's not like you can get away with having all white casts anymore, but we're still really centering white people constantly. And I think that if we were in another time where this wasn't an issue, right? Where like there was a plethora of people of color as main central characters, I would not think anything of this show because it would be fine. Now, the main character is white and it revolves around his family. The rest of the cast is almost entirely Black people. Like the kitchen is Black people. The other kind of main character is a young Black woman. And so there's a lot of like people of color in the show. I just think that like, it's worth pointing out that there's still this kind of like, it's still about these white people and like their trauma and their drama. And like all of these Black people coming in to fucking help them be better, and like save the day. So, that's my biggest caveat. But other than that, I kind of have no notes. Like the show is just really hit a spot for me. So The Bear, it's on FX, it's streaming on Hulu. 30-minute episodes, 30 minutes, 8 episodes. Highly recommend.
That's cool. I'm gonna have to check it out. And definitely something I was thinking about. I watched the new show Loot on Apple TV Plus.
I watched the first episode.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not.
Yeah,
there's a lot of cast members that I really like, but also like similarly, that's a show where like the fact that the A-list chef that's brought in is David Chang. Like there's a more kind of robust supporting cast in a way where like a show wouldn't have thought to maybe do this 5 years ago. Yeah, we'll see where that show goes. I like a lot of the cast members, so I'm probably gonna stick with it.
Is that Maya Rudolph?
Yeah, it's Maya Rudolph. So like at least it's starring a woman of color.
And Joel Kim Booster and MJ Rodriguez are the two other leads.
Yeah. I watched the first episode. I will probably have nothing to watch one day and watch another episode like that. It was that I put it in that category, but it didn't quite hook me in the way that, whatever. That's my take on it. Okay. Not my freak out. I took out I took out the little like give us the thing, so I don't know how to end this. All right,
it's all good.
We're just gonna end it.
So that is our show for today. Thank you, Bridget, for joining us. Where can people learn more about you and your podcast?
Oh, thank you so much for having me. This was a dream. You can listen to my podcast if you want to hear more about women and queer folks and trans folks and what we're up to on the internet. Check out my podcast, There Are No Girls on the Internet. We're on iHeartRadio. You can find us wherever you get your podcast on. You can follow me on Twitter at Bridget Marie or on Instagram at Bridget Marie in DC.
I'm Anita Sarkeesian, and you can find me at Anita Sarkeesian on all the things.
And I'm Kat Spada, and you can find me at cat_ex_machina on Twitter. And be sure to follow Feminist Frequency at FemFreak on all the socials.
If you are a Patreon subscriber, be sure to stick around for the bonus episode with our very special guest, Bridget Todd.
If you like our show, please help other people find it by subscribing, rating, and commenting on your favorite podcatcher. Thanks so much.
Bye.